Hi, welcome to the Gamesplainer. I'm Jeff the Gamesplainer, and today I'm Gamesplaining top 10 for May and June. So, this is my top 10 for May and June. May was a very slow month for me with actually being able to get games to the table. I feel that I probably only got games that I was going to review to the table, so I didn't get 10 done. But June worked out pretty better, so I've been able to actually go through a selection for the last 2 months. So here is my selection over the last couple of months. Number 10, Irish Gauge. While Irish Gauge came out a few years back, there's been a reprint of it with, I believe it's new art, etc, etc. So the copyright on the back of it says it was last year, 2020. So I'm doing videos for Irish Gauge and for all three of the games in that set. I've got 2 of them. I've managed to play 1 of them. I'm holding off on putting that video up until I at least get the second one played, and I need to get my hands onto the third of the set to see how different they are. Irish Gauge feels really similar to what I understand as an 18xx game, but plays vastly quicker, and it's all about just playing stuff down to move a train line forward or to gain extra length of that train line, and working on building the value of the companies that you have so that you can get paid out, but obviously that then pays out to other people who also own that company. It's a different way of thinking about gaming, but I actually quite like it. I feel like if I actually stepped into the 18xx world, I'd probably really enjoy that, because every game I've played that's kind of like an 18xx, I've really enjoyed. My number 9 game is The Great Western Trail. Now, Great Western Trail came out like 5 years ago, I think it was 2016, in that kind of space. It has just had a reprint this year, or a second edition this year. I'm still playing first edition. I'm yet to decide whether I'll bother looking into the second edition stuff. I might chase after the other versions when they come out, but I'll see how that goes. I really enjoy Great Western Trail. Every time it's come to the table, I've enjoyed it. I fear that playing 2-player, it ends up with us kind of playing the same way every time we come at it. I feel like this game is actually built to be played in vastly different ways. So look, it's a really fun game. The essence of the game is you're traveling along a trail and making elements on that trail kind of pay you out for different things, and all the stuff that's paid out when you get to the end will then pay out a bit bigger, and just keep going around and round until the game's out. But I think that works. It's an Alexander Pfister game. I have found that with his more recent ones, they're very story driven. I'm not a huge fan of that, so I haven't actually stepped in on his worlds too much, but this one I really appreciate and really enjoy. My number 8 game is Scythe. Once again, Scythe has made my top 10 lists. Whenever I play it, it tends to make the list. It's a good game. That's all there is to it. It's a really good game. What I found, however, and it's similar to what I just said about Great Western Trail, is that I tend to try to play the same, and that doesn't work with Scythe. You actually need to step into what your faction, what your player board is talking to, and saying, hey, you're going to do this really well and really easily. You need to step into that stuff rather than just playing the same way each time. I've found that the last few times I've played with the expansion material for all the expansions except for the campaign expansion, but the rest of the expansions, so the airships and things like that, and I've found that really enjoyable. I've found also that I didn't really use that so much, even though other players at the table were using the airships. I didn't really use the airship that much, but I was still able to do really well. So I think there's some value in them, but they're not necessary for playing. There it is, Scythe. My number 7 game is Galaxy Trucker. Yes, Galaxy Trucker still makes my top 10 lists. I really love this game. This is one of the earliest games that I owned. This is one of the games that really got me into the playing and the collecting and the everything of it. I've always found with Galaxy Trucker that bringing it to the table, I'm needing to have players who have played the game before. If I am bringing it to the table with players who haven't played, even if there's only one player who hasn't played before, you've got to use the base material. As you see, I've got the big box, the expansion, all of the expansion material. There's a lot of that goes to waste when I play because I'm almost always playing with at least one player who hasn't played before. So that's my instinct on it. I find that anyone who hasn't played before is probably going to come through the game with maybe $5 or $6 at the end of the game, whereas those who have played before are going to be well over 30 in the amount of money they've retrieved and managed to keep through the game, because they understand how the game plays. But you need to play it in order to understand it and to be able to work towards the various elements that come up in that game. My number 6 game is Whistle Mountain. Now, Whistle Mountain is the follow-up of Whistle Stop, in that it is same artwork or style of artwork, and it is the same designer, or at least one of the designers of Whistle Mountain is the same designer as Whistle Stop. Other than that, they have very little in common. I am glad that I've got both of them. I'm glad that I have done Gamesplains of both of those games and got them out and all that stuff. I think that Whistle Mountain is a better game than Whistle Stop. That's just me personally, but I prefer playing this one. There's a real crunch on this one, because in essence you've got 3 things that you're able to put up onto the board to gain stuff in, or to actually do the things at the board, and then you're going to retrieve everything to kind of push the game forward in essence. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it feels vastly like you're not going to be able to get anything done, especially at the early stages of the game, simply because you only have 3 actions. But you need to have resource to do the bigger actions. But in order to get the resource, you've got to spend the 3 actions to kind of get enough resource in to actually make it viable to do. And I find there's this real crunch right at the beginning of trying to get enough resource stuff to be able to do those things. Whereas when I've played other games, it feels like you should be able to just do the stuff, but you've got to go through this process. And I think that's one of the gems of this game, is there's just a tightness to it that forces you into positions of having to take resource to be able to do the other stuff, but then having to think about the timing on when you do the stuff. My number 5 game is Bonfire. Now, Bonfire will have its Gamesplain coming out this weekend, assuming all my editing goes appropriately. I've really enjoyed this. I've found that I've played this a couple of times now, and I've just enjoyed the playing of it. I've enjoyed the feel of it, because the essence of the game is that there's like 6 different actions that can be done, but you're only probably going to do 3 of them, and you get little tokens that say this action, this action, this action, and you need to spend those tokens before you're able to get more. I've found that it gives a real crunch with, I want to do that, but I can only get these tokens. And going after different things, and pushes you in different angles to be able to do different stuff to move the game forward. And this is a Steffenfeld game, so it's really about this whole big, I could do this. It doesn't matter where your focus goes, you're probably going to do well with it. And I found with each game that I've played of it, that even though it feels like I'm being pushed to do a certain thing, I've managed to do a lot of stuff by the end of the game, when I really didn't feel like I was going to be able to do much right at the beginning. And I think that's the gem of this particular game. It's a really wonderful, intricate game that kind of just meshes everything together really, really well. My number 4 game is Ragusa. Now, I played this as a 2-player game. I wonder how vastly different this game is if you play with the full 5 people. I really want to do that. I think Ragusa is such a good design that it's worthwhile doing, and there's such a tightness on how many things you can do. With a larger player count, it's going to really kind of contract your ability to do a lot of stuff quicker, because on a 2-player game you tend to find that what you want to do is usually available. There's very little that's going to stop you from doing the stuff. There's a whole bunch of elements that you can do. You will find that you'll focus on pushing forward on one of those paths, just like with the last game. You'll find pushing forward on one path because you get a whole bunch more income and resource, etc., from doing that one path. Whereas if you try to do every path, you'll probably do okay, but possibly not as well as someone who has gone after just that 1 or 2 paths to push them towards victory. My number 3 game is Red Rising. Now, Red Rising is one of the Stonemaier games that plays to 6 players. I really appreciate that majority of the Stonemaier stuff plays to 6 players. I think that this game actually works better at the 6 player or the higher player count margins than it does at the lower player count margins, simply because there's a lot of cards and the whole game is about the movement of those cards and just trying to get them through your hand and back out onto the board to make things happen, but to build up a collection of things in your hand. And the more players you have, the higher the likelihood that the deck will be moved through a lot quicker than in a lower player count game where everyone's kind of just doing their thing, but it comes back to your turn, there's only one thing changed on the board. Whereas if you're a player with 6 players, 5 things will have changed, potentially, by the time it gets back to you. I think that's really wonderful. I did my Gamesplainer this a couple of weeks back, so if you haven't come across this one yet, please go and check it out. I understand there's been a lot of backlash on this, and that's been similar on the last couple of Stonemaier games, pretty much since Wingspan came out, where it feels like the company is expecting a Wingspan out of everything, and everyone's just kind of sitting off and waiting for the price to come down before actually doing the purchase. So there's this glut of extra stuff. And that's just my instinct on it. I don't actually have any background information or knowledge, so please don't act on anything I'm saying. But I actually I like it, and just like all the other Stonemaier games, I really like these games. My number 2 game is Merv. Now, Merv is a really, really wonderful game. It's got the Ian O'Toole artwork, just like a lot of my other games, and a lot of games that I really like. And I've had the conversation about this before, where if Ian O'Toole is the artist, I'm probably going to like the game. Not because of his art. Sometimes I don't actually like the art that he's done necessarily, but the games that he is employed to work on are really good games. I haven't come across one of the games that he's got his name on that isn't a good game. Merv is a intricate game where you have a lot of option but not option. I think this is the stuff that fits really well in my wheelhouse, because you have 5 options on each turn. Within that 5 options, they give you a whole bunch of other options underneath the 5 options that you've got. And the more you do in one row, the better off you're going to do. And there's this real push-pull on it all the way around. It's a worthwhile game to have a look at. If you haven't come across Merv, please have a look at my Gamesplay and Gamesplanation. I believe it was really high up in my estimations last time I did one of these videos. I think it was the number 1. And this was really close to being my number 1 again this month, or these 2 months. I really, really like this game. I think it's such a wonderful idea of a game. There's so much to do, but you're kind of drawn to doing specific paths within each of those things. My number 1 game for May and June is Prague Kaput Regni. Now, Prague Kaput Regni is a Vladimir Suchy game. It's a really, really good design. It fits right in my wheelhouse with the number of things that you can do, but your choices are very limited. So in essence, you're choosing one of 3 or 4, I can never remember the number of things there are, that sit around a wheel, and that wheel makes things cheaper and actually gives you benefit the further around it gets. And so you push towards taking stuff that's kind of been around the wheel a while, rather than having to pay for stuff, which then brings your thought process into, oh, I just want to do that, or just do that. And when you take a token, so you're paying for it, or you're getting money for it, or sort of points for it, should I say, you take that, you then have a choice of 2 things, and you're making that decision. And each of those decisions is an action, and what you're doing with each of those actions is different to each other. You can see how it fits right in my wheelhouse, right? It's such a simple concept, but with such depth in its variability in what you're thinking about as you're playing. So look, I will leave it there. Please go ahead and watch my Gamesplay and Gamesplanation for any of these games. I believe that all of them will have a Gamesplay and Gamesplanation up by the time this video comes out anyway. The only one that's coming out this week is Bonfire, which should be up by now, so please go have a look at whichever games kind of pique your interest. There's some older games there, but I find that at this moment I'm playing through games that are right at the top of my to play list, games I really, really enjoy playing. And so This is a solid list of games. Please have a look at them. Let me know if you have any thoughts or ideas. Please comment below. If you have any games that you would like to be gamesplained, please shoot me an email to thegamesplainer@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter @thegamesplainer to keep up to date with the games I'm playing. Subscribe to my videos to keep up to date with the games that I'm gamesplaining. And until next time, enjoy gaming.